So we're going to talk affirmations and what they are. Affirmations is a word that you might hear thrown around on the internet a lot, but nobody ever says exactly what it is. They just tell you to go look in the mirror and say some positive stuff at yourself. That's a basic idea of what it is, but an affirmation is generally a full sentence that contains some kind of power for you that you're using to help manifest that into your life, into your mind, into your psyche. I am loved. I am worthy. I will get that job. I will do this. And it becomes ingrained in your psyche, and you begin to believe it through repeating it over and over again until it becomes true to yourself and true to you. And it's a powerful tool to aid in your manifestations. If you do something like an abundance working, so to speak, and that abundance working is for obtaining a 50K plus a year income in the next 6 months. I will get that job. I am richer. I am prosperous. I have this in my bank account. You repeat it again and again and again until you manifest it, and it adds power to that abundance working that you had previously done. Affirmations. Binding. So what is binding? Binding is the magical or spiritual act of stopping someone or something from doing something. Some people view bindings as a more baneful act, but it doesn't quite fall into that category in my personal opinion. You can bind a person from doing harm to themselves, to others. You can bind a practitioner from being able to cast or being able to cast certain types of workings. You can bind another person from being able to do certain things that emotionally harm you. You can bind your own feelings from causing you strife. If you have romantic feelings for a person and you don't want that interfering in your life anymore because they're just not interested, you can bind those feelings and then banish them from you. Binding. Channeling. So what is that? Channeling is another one of those things I hear a lot of people say when they're teaching spell work or talking about spell work, but they don't really ever go into what it is or even an example of how to do it. Now, with things like readings and mediumship, there's also channeling, but that's not my area of expertise, so we're going to stick with spell work. Channeling is not necessarily harnessing the energy, but it's tapping into it and funneling it through yourself to boost the working that you're doing. Ooh, wind. Sorry. The most common method of this is the candle during the spell work. The candle is the element of fire, and it is already adding energy into your spell working. And you're holding your hand over that flame, and you're feeling it, and you're drawing in the energy from that flame, and you try to feel it. You learn how to feel the different energy signatures of things to where you can feel it course through you, and you can then direct it with your hands, because your hands act as your energy directors into the working that you're doing, out into the universe if you're needing to push it out that way at that point in time. And you can channel energy from lots of different places. You can channel energy from another practitioner. You can channel energy from crystals. You can channel energy from the elements. You can channel energy from music. It's a matter of learning to feel it so you can learn how to direct it to where it needs to go. Divination. What is that? So divination is the act of seeking knowledge from the divine, from spirit, or the act of trying to foresee or foretell the future. There are a lot of different options for divination. There is scrying, which includes mirrors, smoke scrying, your crystal balls, water. I have also known a person who used liquid mercury for scrying, because that sounds safe. We have pendulums, tarot cards, oracle cards, affirmation cards, playing cards can be used for divination. There are divining rods, dowsing rods. You have your psychic mediums. You have people with the clair gifts, clairaudience, clairvoyance, the gift of future sight. There are a lot of different ways to get these divine messages. Some people believe in it, some people don't. Like with anything else, divining is a skill that requires practice and research to learn how to do it. There are some people, though, who are just born with a gift for divination and future sight. Some people have to work at it a little bit harder, but everybody does have the ability to do it if they just simply dedicate the time and effort into learning it. Evocation. What in the hell is that? Evoking something's energy is kind of like borrowing it. When you evoke something, you're calling on an ancestor, a spirit, a deity, or an entity of some kind, and asking them to lend you their power to either boost a working that you're doing, bolster something within yourself that you feel like you need more energy for. And you're not taking it in. And people will confuse the terms evoke and invoke when doing spell work or magical craft. Invoking is a totally different territory than evoking is. There are even different hand motions for evocation and invocation. Evoking is more hands aimed down at your sides, where invoking is up above. But evoking it is borrowing that power for a short amount of time for a specific purpose. Fetches, or fetch spirits. What are those? The fetch spirit is believed to be a part of the witch's soul, and you as an individual are comprised of 3 different parts. That's going to be the higher self, the middle self, and the lower self. Your fetch spirit is that lower self. It's your emotional self, it's your intuition, and it's very instinctual. Now, a fetch spirit can be used to do tasks and favors for the witch, and there are different little rituals and workings and such that you can do to connect with the fetch, and then thereafter ask it for favors and send it on tasks. The fetch is also connected to the myth that a witch can shapeshift. Now, the fetch spirit usually appears as a copy of the witch's physical body, but it has been also known to appear as an animal spirit or in an animal form, and it's believed that that is what people were seeing. They were seeing the embodiment of the fetch turn into the animal shape rather than the witch, his or herself. And there's also a belief that whatever happens to the fetch happens to the witch. There have been stories told of a fetch spirit being injured in a certain way, and then the witch later found with those exact same wounds. Goetic entities. Goetic entities are the 72 demons of the Ars Goetia. I chose them for G because in the last couple of years there's been a huge rise in their popularity, especially with practitioners of the left-hand path. I don't know what sparked the newfound popularity with them, but with it came a lot of misconception on this app about them and about who they are. The 72 Goetic demons include entities like Asmodeus, Belial, Mammon, etc. A lot of people like to work with them to gain notoriety, to gain power, to gain money. And while they can give you these things, it comes with a price. Quite frequently, you have to offer them something in return for the gift you are requesting. And should you cross them, they will take away anything that they have given. You see a lot on this app people referring to them almost as mommy and daddy figures. They are not. Can they be loving, patient, and understanding? Yes, they can. But they are far from mommy and daddy figures. Belittling them is not something I would recommend. Crossing them, I most definitely would not recommend. Always hold up your end of the bargain that you make with these spirits. If you don't, whatever has been given will be taken away. And these entities very much can put your dick in the dirt. Haints. So what are haints? Haint is a version of the word haunt that comes from an African vernacular of the Gullah Geechee people in the Carolina region of the United States. It's a belief system that has migrated down through the southern region as the people migrated over time. And it's something that you also see common in Appalachian folklore, mountain folklore, the hoodoo belief system, and several others throughout the southern region, especially the southeastern region of the United States. Haints are ghosts, spirits, largely viewed as evil spirits, malicious, mischievous, and all around a bad time. If you have ever seen in a southern yard or an Appalachian yard a wooden tree, kind of like a coat rack almost, built that has blue glass bottles on it, that is to repel the haints. If you see homes in the region whose porches have been painted in blue, that is to repel the haints. There's even a shade called Haint Blue, because it is believed that certain shades of blue and indigo repel these spirits because they hate it or it confuses them. The two vary from region to region. One belief about haints is that they are evil, witch-like creatures who will chase their victims to death from exhaustion. Some systems believe that they are responsible for hauntings, possessions, bad luck, very bad luck, up to physical injury. So, haints are not friendly spirits and they're not Casper. Incantations! What are those? Okay, so what is an incantation exactly? Simply put, it's the words to your spell. It's a way of directing the energy and telling the spellwork what you're wanting it to do. Are they a requirement? No. Are they helpful? Yes. You don't have to speak an incantation out loud. It's something that you can do inside of your mind. They can be a simple statement like, manifest for me prosperity for my greater good. That can be an incantation. If you want to be extra or you have a flair for the dramatic, you can make them rhyming sentences. You can put them together as a poem. You can turn your incantation into a song if you choose. This is bugging me. But in the end, they're not required for spell work. I know some practitioners who do not use an incantation whatsoever. They just visualize what it is that they want and they go from there. For some people, adding words to the spell adds power because you are speaking that thing into existence. Jinxes. So what is a jinx? A jinx is an unlucky or malicious thing, person, or sometimes outside force. When a person is jinxed, they attract unlucky energy to themselves. If the jinx is in physical form, then it attracts the unlucky and the malicious energy to itself. And usually that's placed on a person or on their property, so it affects them. Jinxes are not to be confused with hexes, though they quite frequently are thought to be the same thing. The main difference is a jinx is generally an unintentional thing. You will accidentally jinx someone by wishing these things on them. A hex is done by design, put together and applied to that person on purpose. So jinxes are accidental and hexes are intentional, but the two are very similar in that a hex also draws in maliciousness and unlucky and negative things. Karma. Karma, or sometimes called the threefold law, is the belief that whatever you do in this lifetime will either come back to get you or bless you in the next one. With the threefold law, you hear whatever you put out will come back at you times 3, be that good or bad. That being said, not every spiritual path or practice subscribes to the law of 3 or the law of karma. They are specific to specific beliefs. So the entire idea that if you do baneful workings or something against someone's will, that it will come back at you by 3, although it can be a good thing to live by as far as morality goes, it's not something that everyone believes in. And if you take it back to Wicca and the Wiccan Rede, you actually have a person named Thorn Mooney who pointed out at one point in time that Wicca can be viewed in a certain light because it sounds as if the Wiccan Rede prohibits you from doing negative hexing or baneful workings. And he points out that that's actually not the case, and that many Wiccans will in fact make use of hexes when they need to or when it's appropriate. And that's what you have to remember with things like that and karma and the threefold law, is what you're doing justified. Layering. So what is layering when it comes to witchcraft and spellwork? It is more or less exactly what the word sounds like. It is adding layers into your spellwork. There are a couple of different ways that you can do this. You can layer your different things together in one working, like in one sitting. Like for an abundance working, you can do your core abundance money drawing spell, but if you want this to be for business, you can then add a layer of business prosperity onto that, as well as you can add a protection aspect on that to protect that business and that money. Another thing that you can do is a layer over time working, where you can either add in the other aspects, or more commonly, it's layering the same intention again and again over a period of days. Like you do your protection working tonight, but then the next night you go back to it and you add another layer of protection working to it, and so on and so forth for however many nights you intend on doing this. Manifestations. That's a word that's been going around this app a lot recently, specifically with manifestation candles. So let's talk a little bit about what a manifestation is. And you'll hear things in other belief systems and paths that are essentially the same thing, like speak it into existence, pray for it. These would be forms of manifestation. What it is you are putting the energy out there into the universe for something that you want to happen, and you are speaking that thing into existence by repeatedly doing this. Manifestation workings are drawing on the energies of either deities, spirits, or the universal source energy to send that out there and let those powers that be bring to you that thing that you want. With manifestation workings, they do require maintenance. They're not permanent. So you will have to redo those manifestations as time goes on. If it's in the form of a manifestation spell, you give it X amount of time, you do another one, you refresh it. If it's a manifestation object, you refresh it later on to keep that energy flowing and keep that manifestation going. The Nazar. So what is this little symbol that we see a lot of people in the witchcraft and spiritual community wearing? You'll find people from other faiths and backgrounds who will tell you that this is the symbol of the evil eye. It's the exact opposite of that. It's actually designed to protect you from the evil eye or evil or malicious energies. What's the evil eye? It is having something bad put on you. Some people view it like a hex or a curse. Some people view it as wishing ill will on you. That would be them putting the evil eye on you. And the Nazar protects against things like that. So this is actually a good symbol, not a bad one. It's a protective symbol, not a harmful symbol. You can buy them in all kinds of forms. They come in different colors. I've read that the different colors will correspond to different things, but the different colored ones are also more of a new concept as opposed to the original blue one. Which, oddly enough, that color blue goes back to that other video about haints and spirits not liking certain shades of blue. Osteomancy. What is that? What does that mean? Osteomancy is the art of reading bones or bone casting. It's a form of divination. It's a very old form of divination. There are several different kinds of bone casting sets. There are some like this that are all bones, and they will throw them, and depending on their particular belief, the region they're from, whether or not the bones cross or not or touch is going to determine if it's a yes or a no. There are far more complicated osteomancy sets that include all sorts of trinkets in there with the bones. They can be charms, things like dice, acorns, buttons, you name it, I've seen it in an osteomancy set, more than likely. Teeth, crystals, lots of things. And each individual item is going to have a different meaning about somebody's life, path, whatever the reading is for. It takes quite a long time to learn it, so the suggestion is, if you are getting started with osteomancy, to keep your set simple and keep your questions simple until you get more skilled at the reading of the bones. Pendulums. So what is a pendulum and what does it do? A pendulum is a divination tool. It's one that's pretty popular amongst the spiritual and the witchcraft community because they're currently so readily available, and a lot of them are very affordable. Practitioners will use them frequently to communicate with spirit itself, specific deities, or sometimes specific spirits if we're talking about mediumship. They're usually paired with something like a spirit board or a talking board or a pendulum board. Those can be simple with just a yes, no, and maybe on them. They can be a little bit more complex where they say things like rephrase the question, try again, not anytime soon. It depends on the creator of the board. You'll have some that have the full alphabet on them, so the pendulum can point in a direction of a specific letter for you, possibly even spell out a name or a word. Now, pendulums do not always have to be that type of pendulum. This can be a pendulum. Any of these other necklaces can be. A wedding band or a ring on a string can be a pendulum as well. Any kind of crystal attached to a string or a chain can be used as a pendulum. He's fighting with me. And usually what you'll do with them... Spirit, can you show me yes? Thank you. Can you show me no? Thank you. And then you ask your questions from there. You have to pay attention, though, to make sure you're not subconsciously controlling the swing of the pendulum, because that can happen if you're thinking about it too hard. Just micro movements of your hand can cause this to happen. Or This one little flinch of your finger, and now it's swinging in the other direction. So you've got to pay attention, be very still, brace your hand or your elbow if necessary. But those are pendulums. Quills. In the little poll that I ran, quill was one of the most commonly commented items that people thought I should use for Q. So let's talk a little bit about what these guys can be used for in witchcraft. Now, in your ritual or spell work, feathers or quills make excellent representations of the element air. You can also use the spirit of the bird that it came from in some of your workings and rituals, depending on, what it is and what it stands for. And we know that they can be turned into pens that you can use to write in your spell book, write your petitions, your intentions, your manifestations, your sigils, and you can even use spelled ink to do that with, or you can spell the quill itself and consecrate it just like you would any other magical tool. Another thing it can be used for is your cleansing around your home. Say you're smoke cleansing and there's an area up high you're having a little bit of a hard time getting the smoke to. You just waft it over your dish and help direct that smoke up into the area you want it to be in. And that is what quills are good for. There are some other things, I'm sure, but that's what immediately comes to mind as the most useful versions. Recharging. Things that you make with spellcraft and witchcraft do need to be recharged. I'm not talking like your one-off spells and stuff, but your wards, your manifestations, your talismans, amulets, charms, things of that nature. The energy starts to taper out and wear down over time, and if you want it to continue hitting and doing what it's intended to do, you're going to have to sit down with it and recharge that energy on a regular basis. This also applies to sweetening jars, abundance jars, any kind of jar ward. If you have an ongoing, long-standing hex or curse jar, you're going to have to recharge that by shaking, doing more candle work with it. But all of these things are going to need an energy refresh or recharge over time, because it won't just continue to do it by itself. As energy will begin to wear out on the item, you're going to have to put that back into it to continue manifesting and creating what you've created with that working or ward. Spiritual maintenance. Let's talk about it. So spiritual maintenance is something that a lot of people don't employ in their practice or have never been taught. And what that is maintaining the workings that you've done. Maintaining your cleansings, your altars, your offerings, changing those out, re-cleansing, spiritually cleansing your home, spiritually cleansing yourself. Spiritual baths are a form of spiritual maintenance. If you have wards, you want to refresh them, redo them, renew them on a fairly regular basis, not like super frequently, but you can start to feel when the energy is getting a little stagnant and it needs help. If you have sweetening jars, cursing jars, things like that, you're going to need to recharge those. Spiritual maintenance also includes refreshing your manifestations. Some people do this every week or two, some people do it on a daily basis, just redoing those manifestations, and it's to keep that energy flowing and to keep that energy renewed and fresh so it can continue doing what it is you're wanting it to do. Without the spiritual maintenance, your spell workings and your magic and your manifestations just won't hit as hard as you would like them to. Transmutation. Let's talk about this one because it is one of my favorite types of magic. Hands down. You can take a type of energy and magically transmute it into another type. For some examples, you can transmute hateful energy into love. You can transmute negativity in your home into positivity. You can transmute maliciousness and negative stuff thrown at you into prosperity for yourself. Translation: if people like to talk about you, you can turn that into profit for yourself. You profiting every time they run their mouths. It's a little bit more on the advanced side of the magical practice, but it doesn't have to be super complicated. You can do it honestly with one candle. That's a very simplified version, but it can be done. Or you can do a whole transmute spell working and ritual. You can make transmutation wards around your home and around yourself. Anything that you would like to take that's negative in nature, you can turn it into something positive for yourself through transmutation. Universal energy. Let's talk about what that one is. Now, in certain practices and with certain practitioners, they will call it source, they will call it spirit. At the end of the day, it's all the same thing. It's also taught in Reiki practice when you're learning to be a Reiki master. Universal energy is something that I frequently call in to my spell work for source to lend me that power for the working so I don't completely drain myself by depleting my own energy. Universal energy is something that can be used in healings through practices like Reiki. You can include it in your manifestations, you can include it in rituals, you can include it in a wide variety of things, and it's similar to calling on a deity, but there's no actual deity necessary for this. Like in Reiki, they use specific symbols to call in universal power, or you can do it the same way you would with a deity, asking for source to lend this to you, to power up your working, to power up your manifestation, to aid in your healing, to aid in healing yourself from past traumas or heartbreaks, etc. It's literally, as its name states, it's the universal energy from which we all came, from which we all get our own energy from, and thus it can be utilized by you in all of these workings as an external source of power. Veneration. Now, there are a lot of creators on this app who have talked about veneration, and they have shared a lot of really great information about it. So I'm going to go through some of kind of the key points of veneration and what it is. Now, venerating is a way that we give honor to something, be it gods or deities or ancestor spirits. Veneration is a way of not so much worshiping them, but acknowledging them and giving them importance in your path and in your practice. You can do this by doing rituals and divination with them and in their honor. You can do this by setting up an altar to them, like an ancestor altar, and as well as giving regular offerings to them is also a form of veneration. Now, in my personal opinion, it is not the same as worship, but it is that setting them as a key point in your personal spirituality because they are important to you and you want to show them that honor and that respect. Waters in witchcraft. So I'm sure most of you have heard things like, don't forget to make your moon water and stuff like that. It goes far beyond moon water when it comes to magical workings. You have the different types of naturally occurring waters, from rain to snow to hail to river to creek to ocean to pond. All of them have their own purposes. There's stagnant water, swamp water. You have your moon water, new moon water, eclipse water, that's solar or lunar. You have solar water. You have supermoon water. All of them have their own correlations, their own uses. Like, moon water can be used to power up a spell, it can be used to bless something, it can be used to cleanse things, it can be used to charge things. If you store it properly, you can drink it during rituals. And here at the end, I will show you, like, a view of what I've got going on in my cabinet as far as water goes. But it's a very, very versatile tool. You can use it for activation of things if you don't want to use fire. It's used in a lot of different cleansing things. It's a very useful thing to have on hand. And moon water is really easy to make. Don't mind the state of the cabinet. She's very, very old. In here, I keep things like oils I mix into stuff I need to replace, some herbs that wouldn't fit anywhere else, but here are waters. These two are storm water collected from a particularly nasty storm that came through. This one is from the most recent supermoon. This is eclipse water. That is Rose of Jericho water from my Rose of Jericho money bowl. Oh, getting a little full in here. Standard moon water and swamp water or stagnant water for causing stagnation. And that one in the bag is the war water. That's a totally different video though. Crossing. I'm not gonna lie, I couldn't think of a single thing that started with X. The next two letters are gonna go about as well as this does. So I'm going to talk about crossing and what it is. Because you hear all the time, uncrossing this, uncrossing that, take an uncrossing bath. But what is crossing someone? Now, there may be some people who disagree slightly, and that's perfectly okay. But crossing is when you hex somebody. You are crossed if they have hexed you, because a hex is temporary, and a curse lasts more like forever unless it is broken and removed. A hex will wear off or is easier to remove. So, in essence, hex is crossed. Cursing is not. That went fantastic. U, or the yew tree. So the yew tree has a lot of different correspondences and meanings in pagan and witchcraft related paths. The plant itself is toxic to a degree, so keep that in mind when working with it. But yew is frequently attributed to death as a result of the toxicity. But with death, you also get rebirth. Even if you take into account the death card, like in tarot, it's a cycle. It is a death and rebirth cycle. That makes you a really good thing to use in things like transmutations and transformation spell work, because you can use that transitionary property in both of those workings equally as well. Now, something that I was educated on about the yew physically is that it was used in making composite bows that were very flexible but very hard to fire true with. So it not only took a lot of skill to use these properly, it was believed to also require a certain degree of luck. And as such, yew is also attributed to things like luck. So you can use it in a working that has to do with garnering more luck into your life as well. Zenith. Z was the hardest letter of this entire series to nail down and decide on and get a good subject for. It's been a couple of weeks. So what is a zenith? There are a couple of different definitions, so to speak, of zenith. It is the point directly above your head on a celestial body like the Earth, and it is also the highest point of a celestial body in an arc. So if you were to apply this to magic, the zenith is the high point, the point at which the power is the strongest. So if you were to be doing a solar or a lunar working, for example, and you wanted to harness the strongest power of one of those two celestial bodies, you would want to do the working when that body is at its zenith, or its highest point of the day or night, depending on where you are. So when the sun reaches its zenith, its peak, you would have the strongest rays of solar energy. And when the moon reaches its peak at night, you will have the strongest rays of lunar energy to use in those workings. Zenith. The series is complete.